When I got the call, it was really too late. I was there. I held his hand. And there was a moment when the nurse comes in and she says, I'm going to go ahead and disconnect him. So he's probably going to struggle a little bit. But this could be a very difficult thing to bear witness. A lot of people step out during this time. Let me know how I can help you.
It all starts with a single question asked to an anonymous caller. What do you think happens when we die? And from there, the conversation goes in completely unexpected directions. Some speak with certainty, others with doubt. Some are still trying to make sense of it all. I'm Zach Ansell, and this is When We Die Talks, a podcast about death, meaning, and how that shapes the way we live. This podcast was born from my own fears around death and the need to talk about it. Thank you for being a part of this conversation. I'm glad you're here. This episode is brought to you by The Death Deck. Want to talk to your family members about the future but don't know how to start? The Death Deck is a lively game that uses multiple choice questions and a dose of humor to help start conversations about death, dying, and illness. Learn new and interesting things about your friends and family members while becoming prepared for the future. And new this fall, the Death Deck introduces the Dementia Deck, a planning tool to talk about the type of care and treatment you'd want if you were living with dementia. All Death Deck products are available at thedeathdeck.com. Hey, welcome back or welcome here if this is your first time. First off, I hope you had a wonderful holiday break if you celebrated. I definitely enjoyed the week off from worrying about the podcast and social media. I spent a lot of time with the dogs, cooked some great food, and I read a ton. I may have enjoyed the break a little too much because it was a little hard to get back into the swing of things. And I didn't make that any easier on myself by switching not once, but twice, which episode I was going to release this week. The good news is that means I have 2 other episodes basically halfway edited. The bad news is that means I had to pull a couple late nights to get this one done. It may not be apparent from the outside, but I try really hard not to just share interesting conversations, but to share a variety of calls and avoid repeating the same theme back to back. As I edited those other 2 episodes, I realized they both touched on a similar topic to one we heard right before the holiday break. You will still hear those episodes. I'm just spacing things out a bit. One of them is from our international caller in New Zealand, and I promised I'd share that one before the end of the year, so you'll hear that in the next couple weeks. So ultimately, I landed on this one, but I don't want you to think that means this call isn't interesting or one that I wasn't excited about. In fact, this is the episode I wanted to use all along. It's just also one of my most recent recordings. What makes it so compelling is that it centers around something we really haven't talked about on the show: guilt, which is something that can show up alongside grief and make the whole healing process even more challenging. This conversation was so incredibly human, and I know that's a strange thing to say because, of course, it's human. But what I mean is that you can really feel how complicated it is to be a person, how something painful or unexpected can grab a hold of you and completely disorient your inner world. And while grief is something that's finally starting to get more attention, guilt continues to be the quieter, lesser talked about emotion in relation to death. Listening back, I kept noticing these layers beneath the surface. Even though our caller speaks in such a composed and thoughtful way, there's so much happening just under the words if you pay attention. We also talked about the practical side of death, end-of-life planning, family dynamics, and what it means to leave behind a roadmap so the people you love aren't left piecing things together in the hardest moments. And we close out the call with a bigger question about accomplishment and how we know when we've done what we came here to do. It's a thoughtful and deeply layered conversation, and I'm grateful he was willing to share it. Let's get into the call. I hope you enjoy.
Hello?
Hey, how's it going?
I'm doing all right. How are you?
I'm not too bad. Thanks for being willing to jump on and do a call with me.
Absolutely.
How's the day going? Everything good?
Down here, we have really long summers.
Okay.
So it's nice when the temperature goes down. It's not fall-like, but at least it's patio weather.
We'll take that win, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, thank you again for being willing to do this. Maybe you could just let me know why you even wanted to have a conversation around death, because this is a topic that a lot of people don't want to talk about. So I'm super curious to hear why you wanted to.
Yeah, I first saw, I guess, posts on it. It piqued my interest because I'm sure, like many people, we have views, we have thoughts
Yep.
on it. And gosh, no one wants to talk about it. Everyone, as soon as you bring it up, people either shy away or they automatically think that you're going through something or that you're stuck in this space.
Yeah.
Whereas I don't think that's necessarily true. I mean, it might be, but I think it's more of a, this is how I see the world and this is how I see, what happens after you die. And I think that in a way we should maximize more of our lives now because there's nothing else afterwards.
Well, if you think it's already something that people don't want to talk about, let me tell you, when you start a project about death and say that you're talking to anonymous people about death, you even get some weirder looks and some questions of like, are you okay? Do we need to be worried about you?
And I would say, people will start assuming or thinking, are you sick?
Yeah.
Are you an individual that we should be alerting the police about? I would also say your gender has something to do with that, right? People will say that males, and I'm assuming here, but there's this male loneliness culture or male loneliness epidemic going on. And if you're dwelling too much on these thoughts, and obviously you're suffering from that, and two, you could become, a liability. You could be a safety issue. It's just, there's a lot going on.
There really is. But before we dive into that, maybe you can give us an idea of roughly kind of maybe like city, state, where you live, and then your favorite book and why.
Gosh, if you had told me to prepare my favorite book, gosh.
I know you asked, and I was like, this is the one question I really like to kind of just throw at people because I think it says a lot about your personality. So I think if you have time to kind of like think about it and curate it, that's different.
I'm in the Gulf Coast of Texas, actually within the Sugar Land, Texas area. And I would just say my favorite book, it's a fantasy book that I found a couple of years ago called Children of Time. And it deals with artificial intelligence. It deals with science, living in space and creating intelligent life that is of the different species and what it means to be human.
Is this a trilogy? Well, actually, I think maybe a fourth book just recently came out. Or am I thinking? Yes.
It is a trilogy.
And they made like the Netflix show out of it? I think it was
Netflix.
No,
there's no Netflix show.
Okay, maybe I'm thinking of a different book.
Yeah. It would be really hard to do a show or movie. I mean, I'm excited about it, but it would be really hard because I think that some of the main characters would be really hard to design.
Okay. I don't know if I've read it then. I think the one that I'm thinking of is from a Chinese author.
Oh, yes. That one. It's a good one too.
Well, thank you for the recommendation. And now we can kind of get into the easy question. We got the hard one out of the way, and now we can just start this conversation with, what do you think happens when we die?
Growing up, I grew up just like most Americans, listening to ghost stories and wondering what happens when people pass away, and do the spirits linger or do they move on? And you get inspired by television and movies, and you see what happens supposedly, right?
Yeah.
I remember one of my favorite comedies is called Ghost. A person passes away and the person has unfinished business, and they go through a range of obstacles in order to pretty much get to the end or to move on. And religion also has a stake in that. I grew up in a Catholic household, and so there's this, making sure that you honor your religion, so that way you're able to move into heaven, and you're not stuck right in this middle world where you're not able to move on. So I would say ghost is a very American or very human belief.
Yeah.
But over the years, I like reading. I like reading a lot of scientists and their take on things. And one thing that I remember reading one line out of an article was, if there are ghosts or if the spirit moves on or, whatever happens, we still haven't deciphered or documented what that next stage records, or the recorder of the next stage, right? So in this world or in life, we know that we have a body and we have a brain, and we have these organs that can at least document, a life, a spirit, a soul. And humans, we still haven't been able to figure out, what documents our spirit afterwards. What happens when we die?
Yeah.
Where does it go to? Where does it get recorded? And we watch I'm going to bring this up again. Watching a movie like Contact, right, where the main
Yeah.
character, Jodie Foster, she's getting messages from outer space, and they're building a machine. And, eventually she travels through time and space, and the person she meets is the vision of her father. And so it brings back to the spirituality part. But, we still haven't figured out here on this planet what happens. Where do we go afterwards?
Yeah.
Does our soul stay? Does our soul move on? Does it join the universe? And I feel like sometimes culture just keeps trying to explain things away of like, yes, of course it goes on. And
they
if
want to
it's
put a
not
pretty bow
heaven,
on it.
yeah, if it's not heaven, then it's the universe. And if it's not the universe, it's some other ether.
Yeah.
And sometimes I think, well, if we can't even figure out that next phase, why are we coming up with these stories? And I think I know the answer, which is we want to feel better about it.
Yeah.
But we're sentient beings. We are, flesh and blood, and we're kind of really stuck on this planet because we're made out of this planet, and that's something else. And my faith teaches me to have hope, and I use my faith daily. In fact, I pray daily. When I go to sleep, I pray for things that are really important to me from a very humanist view. And there's a moment that I always pray for my ancestors. I pray that they're in peace. I pray there's no unfinished business.
Yeah.
And every night I think, gosh, I'm so silly. I'm doing this. But I kind of want to, be at peace before I go to sleep.
Yeah.
I wake up and then it's all over, back to nothing happens. We're just living things.
Yeah.
We're connected by tissue. We have nerve endings and there's electrical impulses moving through our bodies. And when something gets damaged beyond repair, that's the end of it.
Yeah.
And it's been a very loose belief in that until, I got a call one day from a family member, long distance family member, who said, my father was in his last stage of life. And so I had a very fraught relationship with him, and I decided to find out what was going on. And I found myself actually counting the last 3 days I had with him, with his body in the hospital when his body was shutting down. And he was connected to a breathing apparatus. I wasn't able to converse with him. His eyes opened and, I could hear the breathing, or at least the difficulty in breathing.
Yeah.
And so I knew that his body was shutting down. I knew that there was no reverse here. And my family member, my aunt, came over and she said, I think that even though you had a very fraught relationship with him, he's at peace now. I think that you and your presence here has changed his course. And I think he's very grateful that you're here to change that course. And, it was a very emotional experience for me, but I wasn't convinced that I was able to reach him in that stage and make him more comfortable, even though he was passing away and his body was shutting down. I felt like there was already, a disconnect there.
Yeah.
Where, yes, we had a fraught relationship and nothing I could do would mend it, but it was also too late to mend it because the body was going through a very natural process of shutting down. And even though he opened his eyes, and I could see my aunt saying, oh, he's understanding that you're here, and he's understanding that you came one last time. Deep down, I felt, no, that's just the body responding, sending the last electrical impulses, trying to stay awake, trying to fight the medication, fighting the tube, but there's nothing there.
Yeah.
It's perhaps very reductionary to say there was nothing there, but I could see that it was mostly his body fighting.
Yeah.
So for me, it was this experience of understanding. Of course, afterwards, I kept thinking, is this presence around me? Is he following me now? I had to kind of come to terms with the fact that I think that he's moved on and that essence of him is no longer there, nor is it anywhere else. I think that his essence is really glued together by myself, by my views, by my feelings, my emotions.
Yeah.
It's kind of an idea or an abstract created in my mind that still exists of him. It took a while for his body to move from the hospital to the funeral home and then getting his remains back. You go through this process thinking, okay, he passed away, so I'm going to get his remains in a couple of days. And it actually took around a month and a half.
Oh, wow.
And I was told, wait any minute, you're gonna, get a call. And so at work, I told my fellow manager, hey, might be getting a call, so I might step out, take some PTO, handle this. And
Six
every
weeks
day
later.
came in and nothing happened. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
They were
yeah.
probably like, did this actually even happen? Not to make light of it, I apologize. But yeah,
no,
it
no.
is wild
Well,
that it took so
you
long.
start
And
thinking about
yeah.
the horror stories, right?
Oh yeah.
Where the body gets taken to the wrong funeral home, or they take the wrong body. And there's plenty of stories. I think there's a couple on HBO right now of funeral homes that
the
were doing
mortician.
criminal
Yeah.
exactly criminal activities. And so I start thinking about why they're taking so long. But I remember getting his box and thinking, this is so small. And as soon as I laid my hands below it to hold it up, there was a heft, this heaviness, because you're thinking, you think about ashes, you think of the light. In fact, the amount of ashes you produce has a weight to it. And so I remember just putting him in my bedroom, thinking that's the safest place I can have him.
Yeah.
And I'm currently in my bedroom, and I'm currently looking at him. He's in this box.
Yeah.
And I thought about all these arrangements of going to a cemetery and getting what's called a niche. It's a special plot of land where you kind of store the ashes behind a wall.
Yeah.
And I looked into it, and I thought about it, and I just felt that was kind of removing this memory of him far away from myself.
Yeah, distancing him.
So I just kind of, and so I decided, I'll just keep him here for now until, with the passion, I know what to do. And I still haven't figured that out. Sometimes I look at the box and I think, are you looking at me right now? What are you thinking about me? But I know that they're just ashes. And, I don't necessarily feel like there's a bigger presence above me, around me. I know that the construct I had of him, lies within me, within my mind.
Yeah.
And that's sort of it,
Yeah. It's interesting because I hear almost like this duality almost to some extent of like, there is this very, and this is probably not the right word to use, but almost this kind of like very logical, and I guess maybe it makes sense to the books that we were talking about before, like a scientific kind of approach to the beliefs. But then you also talk about praying every night. And so there is also this kind of faith, and it almost feels like there's this kind of dance between those two things within you. And maybe I'm reading into it incorrectly. From what I'm hearing, it almost feels like there's this kind of very logical scientific side that is saying, there is nothing. It's just ashes and he's not here with me. But maybe at the same time, there's this hope that there is something more.
Well, that's how I see it. And to be honest, I go throughout my day, and it's not just I think about a lot of other things, including my faith and religion. And I think, well, a lot of these problems in the world are man-made problems. They're not problems created by a deity. They're not problems created because of religion. A lot of the issues that we deal day to day are man-made. And so the solution for these problems are man-made solutions. And so I think that we have to look at the world in a very logical way of what created this problem. Is it because we're not funding this, or is it because we're not supporting this, or is it because we find this to be, according to our value system, the opposite of what's good in our value system?
Yeah.
And if that's the problem, then we have to find a solution that is also logical, something that I can do. I can't necessarily pray something away and expect it to happen, and hundreds and thousands of years later, it's still an issue.
Yeah.
And so every day, it's a very logical day. And then at night, I guess maybe my body and my mind is just tired.
It's tired. Yeah. You've run it ragged and it's ready to just let go.
Like, you know what? I don't know how it works, but I pray for problems ameliorate, for them to be resolved. And then I wake up the next day and it's, a new front of all these problems have a human solution. And that's how I do it every day. And I hate to say that I'm an only child, because I'm not. I had another sibling through my father, but she has her own family now, her own family that she's raised, and has a partner to take care of. But in my area here in Sherwin, Texas, I am an only son. I'm an only child. And so I have to take up a lot of responsibilities within my family, including supporting my extended family members, supporting my grandmother, And she's at that age where every doctor's visits, the doctors want to have that discussion of end of life, of have you had a plan for end of life? And it's actually her annual visits. And I've been to 3 of her annual visits where the doctor has straight out asked her, what are your end of life plans?
Mm-hmm.
And they always reassure her and tell her it's normal. We don't like to talk about this. It makes people uncomfortable, but it's a necessary conversation. And it's one that we have. It's a healthy conversation that we need to practice. And every time it's always oh, I haven't thought about it.
Yeah.
It surprises me because I've been there with her 3 times now. And I know that I have my own plan.
I was going to say, you've left every single one of those meetings being like, okay, let me figure my end of life. You're like, wait, hold on. I did the homework assignment.
Exactly. Push comes to shove, I can get a casket at Costco.
Yeah.
That's something that I learned.
Which is wild.
And then
the future is now.
Exactly.
Some weird future, but the future is now.
Yeah. But it's so obvious to me that everyone should have a plan.
Yeah.
And, I don't want to be caught off guard. And obviously, one day my descendants are going to be caught off guard.
Yeah. Well, that's the big one, right? Is it's not even you. It's the people that you're leaving behind are the ones who have to really deal with the fact that you didn't figure things out and plan for it. And so it sounds like that falls on you in this instance. You're the caregiver.
Yeah. I come back home and we talk about what, I don't bring up, property or belongings because I think that's something that might be too crass. But I do talk about what arrangements do you want. And I look at her and then I start thinking about other individuals in my family of what are their plans? What are they thinking? And of course, no one wants to talk about it. But you're also keeping it real. You're saying, listen, I don't want anyone to go through hard times. I don't want to have anyone get caught by surprise.
Yeah, I don't want to put anybody else out.
When you're going through your work and you're signing, your life insurance or you're signing your benefits, you want to make sure that it's going to be inherited by someone. I talked to friends about this and they said, yeah, I saw that and I decided I'll just put it off for another year. I'll figure it out later. And I'm thinking, wait a minute, no, because we all think we're going to die when we're sick.
Totally. When I was going to say when we're 70 or 80, but I think most people now have this thought that they're going to live to be 100 and 110 and 120. And that's not guaranteed.
All it takes is just watch the news, just see how many people are in car accidents or murdered, and some are accidents and some manslaughter. You don't know when it's going to happen, but it will happen. And so do you want to be caught off guard where you really can't do anything?
Yeah.
Or make sure that you left the thing so make it easier for family members.
Yeah.
Because they're going to go through a really rough time of trying to stitch things together, of lining up and saying, wait a minute, he had a fund here. How do I access it?
Oh, yeah.
How do I get these emergency funds there?
There's a million things to figure out in that moment. And when you're grieving, when you're in shock, and it's like, don't want to make that harder on people. And not even people, right? I mean, they are people, but like your loved ones, your family, your community. Yeah, you don't want, that's the last thing that you would want to do to those people.
Yeah.
I would think, there might be some, I don't know, I might want to make it harder on my sister. Maybe I'll throw some like wrenches in mine and be like, oh, weird scavenger hunt or something. I don't know.
It would be cool, wouldn't it?
I don't know if she would love it.
But you want people to celebrate your life or people to at least remember you in a fond way.
Yeah.
But I also know that, there's an emotional component to it. There's obviously a practical issue to it. There's a lot.
Yeah.
And I haven't done this yet, but, I eventually want to come up with my own manual. My own what happens when I pass away manual.
Yeah.
And it's sort of, just detailing these are my accounts. Please access them. Please make sure that they don't get lost. And this is what I think is really important.
Yeah.
And this is how I want to be honored or not be honored.
Yeah.
I want to make sure that you understand very well that I don't want the most expensive casket at all.
I want the Costco one.
Cardboard is fine. Cardboard is fine.
Yeah, totally.
It's even more eco-friendly.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think a manual makes sense here.
Yeah.
And it's something that I always think about. Like, this is one I want to make sure people understand.
Yeah.
Because obviously seeing my father pass away and not having that last conversation with him. My last conversation with him was more than a decade ago.
Mm. Sorry, you
And
didn't
so
mention, but like, how long ago did he pass? If you don't mind me asking.
he died in 2023.
Okay. Okay. So yeah.
He
So
died
you
on
hadn't.
September 11th.
So you didn't have a like real full on conversation for a very long time.
No, no, not at all. In fact, I remember the last conversation with him. I was in London. I think it was chilly weather. I was in London, and I called him, and we talked probably 10 minutes. And he said something that bothered me at the end.
Mm.
And so I said, yeah, I don't want to continue talking with you. That's it. And I kind of thought about this, like I don't want to talk to him often either. And then I kept putting off trying to reconnect
Yeah.
because as a son, you want to reconnect. And I kept thinking, well, he's in a happy place and I'm in a good place, so why try to ruin that? And when COVID happened, I kept thinking, where is he? Is he fine? Is he healthy?
Yeah.
And I found myself praying every night,
Mm.
praying that he was well, but I never checked up on him. I never called to figure out what was going on. And, I hate that. I hate that I never did. Because even though he was fine regarding COVID, he was actually starting to go through some rough patches. That's the period he was actually going through a difficult time with his new family. And so I didn't know that. And so
Yeah.
when I got the call, it was really too late. I was there. I held his hand. And there was a moment when the nurse comes in and she says, I'm going to go ahead and disconnect him. So, he's probably going to struggle a little bit, but this could be a very difficult thing to see,
Yeah.
to bear witness. A lot of people step out during this time. Let me know how I can help you. God, she and the other nurses, there were a couple, they were awesome.
Yeah.
They're very nice.
Those
gentle
people are
individuals.
saints.
And I said, no, I'll stay here because there's so many years, so much time that I lost. I want to stay here until the very end, I thought.
Mm. I mean,
I
that's
want to spend
beautiful.
as much time as I can. And they disconnected him. I could hear the shallow breathing become shallower, maybe to a gurgle perhaps.
Yeah.
And then, completely the body just stopped. There's no breathing. He had passed completely. And then the nurse came back in, and they're not like connected. So they don't necessarily, are able to know a person's passed away, definitely.
Yeah.
They just kind of pass through the room and say, just checking on things.
Yeah.
And the nurse saw that he passed away. And so I think she was documenting something. And in my mind, there was this explosion of thoughts, of ideas, and this very kind individual who, again, doing saint work, was now, someone who I hated.
Yeah.
And as I looked at the nurse, I kept thinking, murderer, you killed him. You're the murderer. And there's this anger. And I sat looking at his body. I sat next to the window, looking at his body, looking at the nurse, thinking, you're the murderers. You killed him. You took him away from me. And at that moment, I could have blamed it on anyone.
Yeah.
Because I was angry. And I remained quiet. I cried a lot. I didn't express those feelings. I happen to work also in healthcare, but I was angry. And it just surprised me how I looked at this individual who thought they were beautiful bedside manner, and this individual turned into a monster for me. And it didn't make sense. But in that moment, the reality changes. And it's not a reality based on what's going on in the real world. It's based on your emotions.
Yeah. And there's a lot of them.
And there are a lot of them. I remember my aunt came in. I cried. I had bouts of crying. Like I couldn't control them. My sister came in with her husband. They did a prayer. And my aunt mentioned, she kept saying, I know he's happy. I know that he left in peace because we were here. I could see it in his eyes. And in my mind, I just kept negating everything she said. No, he wasn't at peace. No, he wasn't happy. Or no, he didn't notice that I was here. And again, it's not because I felt a presence or because I felt something in my faith. It was just in the mind.
Yeah.
I kept thinking logically, his body was already shutting down. He didn't know that I was here. And it's part maybe there's this way of pushing that guilt on myself or self-flagellation of like, I did this to myself. I did this to him. He didn't realize that I was here. But yeah, the guilt, starts consuming at you. And while my aunt kept saying, I could see it in his eyes, he's happy that you were here. And I kept negating those statements by thinking, no, his life is passing him by right now. His body is going and shutting down. So if there's anything, he's just seeing his life leave him, all his memories leave him, playing one last time. And, she tried to soothe me. She said, he heard your voice. And I kept thinking, no, if he hears my voice, it's not because he knows I'm there, but he's thinking about the last time he heard my voice.
Yeah.
There's this guilt that's taking over.
Guilt is just one of those things that can be absolutely ruthless. So obviously in a situation where there's a lot of emotion and guilt takes control, it totally makes sense that you were feeling these ways. Have you, because I mean, I would say it's still fairly fresh, right? 2 years isn't that long. Like, have you found some peace around it, or is it still something that you're battling with?
I would say that I'm past it, but
Yeah.
when I express it and when I say it, there's this little lump in my throat that reminds me that I'm not over it. There's the guilt is still there, the pain still exists, and I still do it. Right? I pray every night for my ancestors to be at peace because it's hard to accept all day long. Their bodies at one point seize, no memory, no recollection, no satisfaction, right? There is no soul that leaves and gets to take happiness, gets to take anger to another level, another plane. It just ends there.
Yeah.
And so at the end, there's a lot of hope because during the day, I'm convinced that the body stopped working and that my presence there was too late, that me touching his hand, trying to soothe him was too late, that my voice was too late to do anything.
I haven't been through an experience like that, so there's nothing that I can say to kind of ease that. And I think that's part of our culture too, is like want to fix things, want to make people feel better. But I will say, I feel like you kind of going back to this kind of duality, like you just even said it right there, where it's during the day, it's this logic, but at night, there is this peace. And so it does sound like that there is some self-acceptance isn't the right word, but it seems like there is part of you, this part at night that is allowing yourself to forgive yourself, to not be so hard on yourself, because that is just the hard thing about life, right? Is we just don't know. Well, I mean, there's a million things that make life hard, but it's like we don't know when people are going to pass. And yeah, it's hard when people hurt us and we have these, times in our lives where we're not talking to people that we love and care. And you just never know when the clock's going to run out. And so I feel so deeply for you because it feels like you've put such an immense amount of pressure. Maybe it's not even pressure, just this immense amount of guilt onto yourself. And yeah, I would, as a stranger to another stranger, I'd just say, just give yourself a hug and just say, I think at the end of the day, the thing that I try to tell myself, and I think of others too, I think it's helped, but I think it's better for me to believe that everybody's doing the best that they can. And that might be being a terrible human and doing horrible things. But, for whatever reason, they've been through something or they've done something. I don't know. It just makes me feel better to say, hey, you know what? They're doing the best that they can. And I think in this situation, you did the best that you could. I don't know. Again, from a stranger to another stranger, I would just say, like, I hear the care. I hear the care for your father, even though, like you said, that it was strained. Like there was this difficulty and this challenge. Again, I don't know all the details or anything, but it definitely feels like that there is this love, and I think maybe deep down that like that's enough. But I don't know. I'm just a stranger who doesn't really know anything.
Yeah, in the end, that's all we are, right? And it's because of that being able to show empathy is so important. Being able to show an affinity to make connections is so important in our day-to-day. In the end, we are all strangers living in our own reality. And our worldview is built by all these bricks that hold us together, that were put there by our family values, by our religion, by our education, our faith in science, our knowledge of biology, our knowledge of Psalms, and the hope they bring. And so all these bricks together, they support our worldview. And sometimes we think, our worldview needs a little bit more support, more strength. So we double down on certain bricks more than others. But in order for it to help us, we kind of need all of them together.
I've got one more.
It's a weird metaphor.
No, I think it really makes a lot of sense because in my head, I was almost imagining, trying to build, I don't know, like a really tall brick structure.
like maybe like a chimney, almost just like a freestanding chimney. And, if you didn't have anything to hold the bricks together and you just start stacking them together and forming them together without anything to bind them together, the more bricks you put on and the taller it gets, it's going to be unstable. And so you either need someone to help you hold it up or you need something to hold the bricks together. And that's at least my interpretation, what I took from it. So I thought it actually worked. I do have one last question for you. What is one thing that you still want to experience in this lifetime?
Accomplishment.
What does that mean to you?
I want to be able to feel that I've done it and I'm ready to move on. And of course there are days I'm just like, you know what? After today, I have seen it. I've seen most of the world. And if I haven't been there, I've watched it on Discovery Channel. I've watched it on National Geographic.
Seen it from afar.
The world is beautiful. Exactly. But I know it exists.
Yeah.
And it's beautiful. And I've heard the poetry. And I think, you know what? It's not going to hurt if today I'm not here. Or tomorrow I'm not here. I think I've lived enough and I'm content. And then there's this little pearl inside of me that says, but do you feel accomplished? And it's sort of like, no, not yet. So I know that I still have something I need to accomplish. What it is, I don't know. Maybe
you're on the search.
Maybe for some people it means having a family. Maybe for some people it might mean a business or, community. I know that I still haven't accomplished something.
Yeah, your mission's incomplete.
I think, exactly. Exactly. I know that my time will end. I know that I will have to transition from, having this body that moves and breathes and thinks on its own to a corpse. And gosh, everyone's had that really difficult day where you think, you know what, I'm done. I'm happy.
Yeah.
It's over.
Yeah.
I'm ready to move on. And then, that little ball bearing inside of you saying, no, you're not accomplished yet. And so I want to be able to say I'm accomplished, that I finished what I was set to do. And I'm still searching for that.
Well, I hope you find it. And when you do, you have to let me know. I wanted the day, it's like, I figured it out, Zach. I want to get a message, but I just want to thank you for applying to be a part of this, to be willing to share your story to a stranger over the course of nearly an hour. Yeah, it's been wonderful talking to you. And I just, appreciate you taking the time, and I appreciate you.
Well, thank you for listening to me.
Yeah.
I wish you success in this path that you're taking.
Thank you.
Wherever it takes you. And I hope that it builds upon your worldview in a positive way.
Yeah.
In a positive way. You know where to find me.
Yep.
And you have, the numbers your way to find me.
Oh, man. Well, thank you again. I'm so glad that we did this. And I hope you have a good rest of your day.
Thank you. You too.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
This call made me think about how many of us won't get tidy endings with the people we love. Sometimes all we're left with is what we didn't say and the guilt that fills that empty space. He talks about that openly, not because he's made peace with it, but because it's still very much alive in him. And there's something powerful about hearing someone name a feeling they haven't resolved yet. Because acknowledging an unfinished ending might be the closest thing we get to making sense of it. Thanks for listening to this episode of When We Die Talks. These conversations don't offer answers, but they do open space to reflect, to feel less alone, and maybe to see things a little bit differently than before. If you'd like to explore your own beliefs out loud, you can apply to be an anonymous caller at whenwedietalks.com. And if a full call feels like too much, the voicemail is always open. Call 971-328-0864 and share what you believe happens when we die. Another way to support the podcast is through When We Die Talks Plus. Members not only get early access to episodes, but also every Saturday contemplation, short guided reflections to help you pause and sit with these questions in your own life. And of course, sharing the podcast with friends or leaving a review goes a long way too. Until next time, have a good life.
Hi. I've always liked to imagine that when we die, our souls are reincarnated and that we have an opportunity to choose who we get to be reincarnated next to. So if you have someone in your life who you really love or you have a powerful connection with, once you die, I like to believe that you get to choose to live a life with that soul again. And I think that that makes up our family members. I think it makes up our friends. It makes up our romantic relationships. And it just brings me a lot of peace to imagine that we get another chance at it, whether it's just we didn't learn the lessons that we were meant to learn in this life, or it's just we have so much love that one single lifetime just wouldn't be enough to share it. So you get to do it all again. And the idea is even more peaceful to me than the idea of heaven, because to me it always frightened me to think about just being in eternity in one single space. And, you know, all those teachings that we learned in Bible school and things like that, I find it much more comforting to imagine that, you know, our souls are just energy and it's just part of the universe, and they never really go anywhere because we're just, you know, as people say, the universe is just experiencing itself through us. And so I just find it very comforting to think that it's never really over, and that once this is done, you just get to do it again, and you get to be by the people that you love again forever if you choose to. I just think that's probably my way of healing from weird religious trauma, but the idea makes me, I don't know, it just makes me feel very at peace. Okay. Bye. Good luck with your project.